Chris Farr for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know you had a lot of choices to make. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak to part two. As I said in my contribution to part one, the public need absolute confidence in the security of the information for this expansion of the iGov system to be expanded out beyond what it has operated under since 2009. And as a number of speakers have said already in part two, there is a certain amount of unease with the public, and I think that's probably being a bit kind actually, about the ability of a number of government departments to securely hold their private information given the recent events. And at risk of mentioning these ad nauseum, we've already spoken about the privacy breach in work and income with the thank you, Mr. Wilkenvold. With the kiosks there, we've talked about the privacy breaches with Bronwyn Puller, with the Accident Compensation Corporation. We've spoken about the thousands of people who were affected with the Inland Revenue Department. We've talked about the NovaPay transgressions with some of the personal details of teachers from schools. So I'll get to it. Just hold on. Hi-ho. Patience. So what I would like to talk to about in terms of part two, Mr. Chair, is clauses 20A through to 21B, and that is access. Who is allowed to access the information that we are going to be talking about expanding within the realms of the Department of Internal Affairs and the likes of birth, deaths, marriages and passports. And Mr. Chair, 20A in relation to access says access to core identity information and status information may be accessed by an individual. An individual may access the core identity information contained in the individual's electronic identity credential and information about the status of the individual's electronic identity credentials. So that sets out in 20A, in terms of one aspect, access to this information. But who is going to monitor that is one question I would like to have answered from the Chair. And also, who is responsible in the government about giving assurances, given the context of what's happened recently, about the security of that information and exactly who can access that information. Because, as I've said before, we've had a number of instances, and they have really rocked the confidence of the public about the ability of this government to hold private information. And so in part two, sections 20A through to 21B do, Mr. Chair, talk about who can access this information. And I want to hear from the Minister and the Chair who is going to give the assurances that this is going to be monitored and who is going to give the assurances as to how the monitoring, how there will be any punishment if the provisions within 20A to 21B aren't adhered to. So, Mr. Chair, there is a massive amount of public concern about, the likes of work and income, the likes of ACC, the likes of the Education Department, around the ability for them to hold private information. So we think it's only fair that we're asking these questions of the Minister and the Chair in respect to access, who can access this information, about the assurances that this government can give in the context of recent times. Because, Mr. Chair, there is a serious lack of confidence, and that confidence is probably well-founded given what has happened in the last 3 or 4 months. In terms of NovaPay, that is a new one that has come out because there are a number of teachers whose personal information has been sent to an incorrect school. And the media reports suggest that that gave the ability for administrators at one school to access or to manipulate the finances or the pay of that particular individual. And that is quite shocking, given that this is a secondary issue with NovaPay. It's not the primary issue with NovaPay, because the primary issue, as we know with NovaPay, was the complete inability for it to meet its purpose of paying teachers on time and correctly. So that latest issue with the NovaPay Mr Chair.
Chris Farfoy.
That latest issue with the NovaPay system is just another instance of where a government department has really not met the mark. And you've got to ask the question around governance and whether there is enough monitoring being done. I know there has been an inquiry into the leaks of information at Work and Income New Zealand, and we hope on this side of the House that is actually acted on, because it is a very serious case when you have one individual who can access 7,000 files of information of the likes of invoices, medical records, information about children and where they are staying under protection orders. That kind of information being publicly available to any Joe Bloggs who can walk into the reception of Work and Income would shock most people, and has shocked most people, and therefore the subsequent concern around the ability of the government to assure New Zealanders that they can be trusted with private information. Now, we've had instances of ministers quite liberally throwing around private information, and that is shocking in itself in a political way. But when you get instances of the average Kiwi who has done nothing and is in a very, what's the word I'm looking for, very vulnerable position, and they have had their information, and they have had their I'm glad you find it funny, Mr Bennett. So Kiwis who are in a vulnerable position, who have had family members who have committed suicide or are in protection situations, for their information to be freely available on those kiosks is a concern, and that is why we are asking some serious questions, and I hope that the Minister and the Chair does take the opportunity to answer these questions about who is going to access this information, who is going to monitor the access to this information, and what is going to be done if this information is either incorrectly accessed or is dispersed to people who shouldn't have that information. And that is, I think, given the bipartisan way in which the government administration select committee worked on this bill, I think that is a fair enough question to ask given the times. Also, Mr Chair, just one more point on the access. There will also be provisions in 20B about access to photos. That is, in this digital age, very important, because if you have a legitimate or legitimate seeming image of someone or something, it lends legitimacy to someone on a social media site. So there are very tight restrictions about who can access photos that are held within this realm, and obviously if we're dealing with the likes of passports, you don't want those photos floating around too widely or accessed by the incorrect people, because then it makes much easier the work of people who target the security of passports, and we know that in recent years there have been a number of instances where that has certainly happened. So to have some clarity around that within 20B, I believe, access to photograph, access under Part 2 is very good, and we hope that maybe the Minister and the Chair could also clarify for us what the provisions might be in terms of assurances for the security of photos as well, because in this it is a new provision. Was it inserted by the Select Committee? It looks like it, and Ruth Dyson, the Chair of the Select Committee, would know. But maybe just to reiterate, the Minister and the Chair could assure us around security of those images, because, as I say, images in this digital era, are very, very important. They lend legitimacy to especially official transactions, and when we are talking, as I've mentioned before, about the likes of transactions with passports or births or deaths and marriages, I think it'll probably only be in the case of passports, though, the security and the good reputation of the New Zealand passport could be seriously at risk if we don't have tight controls over who can access the images that are held within the system and that the Department of Internal Affairs has. So, Mr Chair, I just want to reiterate that we are supporting this bill, but I have asked a number of questions of the Minister and the Chair, and I hope that at some stage during Part 2 of this debate, the Minister and the Chair will be able to elaborate on some of the questions that I've put to her concerning access to this information under Part 2.
Members, the question is that Part 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question now is that Part 3 stand part. This is